What happened to Carlos Baleba? That is the question on every Brighton fan's mind right now. A player who not long ago was the heartbeat of our midfield, energetic, dynamic, fearless, now looks like a completely different footballer. And you can't help but think something's changed. But before we start, I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers on this channel, so if you do enjoy these videos, please do consider leaving a like and subscribing. It helps me out massively. Anyway, let's get into it. Carlos Baleba, the next £100 million Brighton success story, or is he? Because the start to the 2025-2026 season has been a bit tough for Carlos. Why? What happened? This is a player who, at just 20 years old, was being talked about as the next big Premier League star. Last season, he looked like one of Brighton's best ever bits of business. Strong, intelligent on the ball, fearless in duels, and capable of dominating against some of the best midfields in the league. But, as I say, the start of this season hasn't been quite the same. He's looked off the pace and not quite the incredible talent we as Brighton fans all know that he is. So what did happen? Is it just a slow start, a lack of fitness after pre-season, or is there something deeper going on? Maybe something psychological? Because let's not forget, over the summer there was definitely interest, and not just from anyone, from Manchester United, one of the biggest clubs ever in world football. And even though it never materialised, that sort of attention does change things, especially for young players who are hungry to reach the very top of the game, despite the fact that potentially United aren't quite there at the moment. And off the back of that interest and Carlos staying at the Amex, it is possible to suggest that his head has turned. Is it too crazy and reactionary to think that he's downing tools and dropping his market value? Personally, from what as a Brighton fan I know of Carlos Baleba, and unfortunately I don't know him personally, I don't really think he's the sort of player or person to do that and purposefully down tools to force a cheaper move. I also think that'd be a pretty stupid thing to do, considering the risk of then losing interest from the possible suitors such as Man United. But whatever the reason, we can all see it. There's been a shift. Now, I want to make one thing very clear. This isn't criticism for the sake of it. Baleba is a phenomenal talent. One of the most exciting midfielders we've ever had, right off the back of having Bissouma and Caicedo. And it wouldn't be completely outrageous to think that he's actually better than both, or at least has the potential to be better than both of them. But football is as much about mentality as it is about ability. And right now, the mental side of his game seems a bit off balance. And that cannot be helped by the fact that he has been subbed off twice at halftime in just 6 Premier League starts, regardless of whether it was deserved or not. It's fair to say that he's began the season a little slower than he could have, and Brighton need him firing again, because when Carlos Baleba is at his best, Brighton are at their best. His energy can set the tempo, his confidence lets everyone else play, and he's the spark that allows the system to flow, and he's just a joy to watch when he's at his best. So the question becomes, how do Brighton and how does Carlos turn this around? And that's what we're going to unpack in this video. From his rise last season to the factors behind his drop-off, the role of Manchester United in this saga, and what needs to happen next for him to rediscover his spark. So let's start from the beginning. How did Carlos Baleba go from being Brighton's next midfield superstar to one of this season's biggest question marks? To really understand what's happening with Carlos Baleba right now, we've got to rewind to last season, where he made himself a player of having a £100 million price tag. He has everything you could want in a midfielder: the tackles, the interceptions, the energy. He's relentless, he's fearless, and he looks like he was enjoying every single second of being on a football pitch. This is a player who at such a young age played with composure of someone 10 years older than him. You could see why Brighton was so keen to sign him in the first place, and why their renowned scouting model has identified him as a Bissouma Caicedo replacement. They've done it again. Another relatively unknown talent, despite the fact that, well, this one was bought from one of the biggest leagues in the world, but then they polished him into a Premier League diamond again. He has that combination that you just don't teach: the strength and the balance, confidence on the ball, the natural swagger where you just knew he's going to dominate duels. And for Brighton fans, it's very much like deja vu. I mean, you just had Bissouma, then Caicedo, and somehow we'd found another one. And like I said, you could argue we upgraded every time. And as we know, that's what the club's become so well known for being good at, finding the next man up in the succession planning, the next jewel in the system. And Baleba is and was that guy. And it's not just his physical and defensive work. People forget how progressive his passing is. He has that ability to take the ball under pressure and just turn out of trouble and break through the lines. The sort of skill that you can't really just teach. It's just instinct and natural ability. He has the legs to win second balls, the body strength to hold off challenges, and the vision to start an attack. And when you tailor that with how Brighton play football, you have a midfielder that's almost perfect for them in the Premier League. And then, of course, because he's perfect in the Premier League, the rumours began to circle, and the biggest interest of all came from Manchester United. And it's not just a dodgy rumour from a Twitter account. The reports are very consistent and reliable. United's recruitment team had identified Baleba as one of their top young midfield targets. And for good reason. He fits the profile. He's just, like I say, everything you would want in a midfielder in the Premier League. And without knowing the effect it had on him personally, it's hard to believe that he just ignored it. As much as I'd love it to not be true, Manchester United are a way bigger club than us. They have a global fan base. They have the prestige to wear the shirt, and they have the financial means to pay even more ridiculous high wages, and all of that is going to have an effect on a 21-year-old footballer. So is that interest the reason for him getting off to a poor start? Another easy thing to say would be that he's just not fit yet, and there is potential truth in that. He missed parts of pre-season with injury. He wasn't playing full 90s. You could see in those early games, especially against Man City, that he wasn't quite sharp. But for me, it feels more than just rust and recovering from an injury. It feels like it is psychological. It's like watching a player whose rhythm has been interrupted, whose confidence has taken a bit of a hit, not just lost his ability, but because maybe his head is in a different place. So what is actually going on with Carlos Baleba? Let's strip away the noise for a second, the rumours, the headlines, the speculation, and just look at the football. Because the truth is, when you compare the stats from this season to last, the numbers can tell you a really clear story. I mean, his passing stats per 90 alone are enough to really draw your attention, as it's dropped from 88% to 79%. That's a huge difference. And it's not just the raw data. You can see it. It's the eye test. He's slower to the press. He's mistiming challenges. He's reacting instead of anticipating. And for a player who's kind of built on his proactiveness, reading the game 2 passes ahead, it's a big shift. Now, there are a few reasons for this. As mentioned earlier, is sharpness. Baleba missed a big chunk of pre-season with minor knocks. And when you play in a position that is so physically demanding of high intensity, being 5% off physically is like being 50% off mentally. But the bigger issue seems to be decision making. And you just got to watch some of the early season performances, and you can see that he's almost second guessing himself. Last year, he would have driven forwards. He would have carried it past 1, maybe 2 players, and suddenly Brighton are on the front foot. It's not that he's playing badly. It's like he's playing differently, more tentative, more cautious, like he's afraid to make mistakes, almost scared on the ball. And that's what makes the decline so interesting, because this isn't the story of a player who's physically fallen off. It's the story of a player who looks a bit mentally restrained and lacking confidence. And once fans notice that, the noise starts to build pretty quickly. Social media can easily amplify this. Has Baleba fallen off? He's not the player people said he was, and he's no way he's worth that much. And Manchester United have dodged a bullet. And all of that noise, it seeps in, even if players say that they just ignore it. Brighton's manager, Fabian Hirschler, even touched on it recently. He said,
"It's not always like that the development goes like this, like linear, like up. There are some downs, and at the moment he seems to be in a small down, but I think it's very important to understand that he's not a machine. He's a very young, talented player. It's a lot of theory, and we can only guess. For sure, when a young boy reads that there's interest from Manchester United, with a big offer, it might affect him deep. Even not if he's saying like it affects me, but maybe deep inside of him there is something what affects him. So that's also part of the development, like to understand that when you play well, there comes a big offer, there comes a big club who wants to have him, but then to keep pushing, to be like humble, stay here in Brighton and try to make the next step together with the team. And that's something where we have to keep on working with him. And therefore I can't give you there a clear answer if it's really affected him or not.
The question isn't if Baleba can find his level again, it's how and when. Because we're all very aware of how good and how capable he is as a footballer, but how does a young player block out the noise, reset his confidence, and rediscover what made him unplayable last season? And how does Brighton as a club manage that process? Now, here's what makes Brighton different and why there's more than just hope in this story. It's just a dip in form, realistically, and he will come out better than this. But if there's a place to do it, it is probably at Brighton. This club gets young players. They know the psychology behind performance. They've built an environment where development is as much about mindset as it is about the metrics. Look at Caicedo. Remember the chaos around his move to Arsenal, where he had the transfer request, deal didn't happen, and people said that he would just check out. Well, 2 weeks later, he's back in the team, giving 100% and helped Brighton qualify for Europe. That's what good management and structure can do. And it's also pretty beneficial to be doing it at a club like Brighton instead of Manchester United, who have that social media eyes on them all the time. And you make a mistake and it's very, very, very much more of a big thing than if you were to make a mistake at Brighton. Fabian Hirschler, to his credit, hasn't thrown Baleba under the bus. He's spoken with empathy, with understanding. He knows that you can't berate confidence back into form. You have to rebuild it. That being said, getting subbed off so many times at halftime probably isn't helping, but you've got to do what you've got to do for the team to win. So you can't really blame him for that. And that's the next challenge for Brighton. How do you manage his minutes, his role and his mindset without damaging his long-term confidence? Because in order to get back to the level he was at, he needs to play. But if he's not performing to a good enough standard, then you don't want to play him. Because for all the data points and tactical tweaks, this is still a young man figuring out how to deal with fame, pressure and expectation, all while playing one of the toughest positions in world football. And the question isn't whether he can handle it, it's whether he can grow from it. And Brighton, with their track record of nurturing young players and stars, is the perfect place for that growth to happen. So, Brighton fans, it's not that deep. What you're witnessing isn't a failure, and he's still only young. And from what we know about Carlos, just from what we can see online, he comes across as the sort of person that will come out of the other side better. He's too talented, too driven, and too well supported to fade quietly. So, on that note, let me know in the comments down below what you think is happening with Carlos Baleba, and whether you think that his head was turned by the transfer speculation. And with all that being said, thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and fade to black.